saw an article recently about the slew of firings and direction shifts among the major players in Hollywood, and I had a thought. Movies and television have always thrived on innovation, finding the next big thing and bucking trends. But the problem is that once something hits big, there's a tendency to copy its formula until it's no longer profitable, and then the scramble for the fresh and exciting begins. We've seen this time and again throughout film history. The gangster flick was replaced by the western and the western and the musical were replaced by the realist auteurs of the 60s and 70s, which were replaced by the overly bombastic and bright screwball comedies and muscle man action flicks of the 80s, which were replaced by the leather-clad Matrix copycats, and so on. And each time this crash and rebirth occurs, great gems rise like diamonds in the rough to inspire a new wave, a crest, and a fall, and a repetition of the same pattern. The thing is, audiences tire quickly of seeing the same old thing, and while you could say that films change because times change, and you would be partly right, there's another reason for this ebb and flow. I once heard the Red Letter Media guys describe it as the Police Academy scale, where you start with a simple small budget idea, it hits, and with each subsequent repetition, the budget increases, the creativity decreases, and the grosses go down until you crash and have to start all over again with something else. The Western, the epic, and the musical eventually became a bloated cash hole waiting to collapse in on itself. And once it did, studios became desperate, firings of studio heads were rampant, and smaller budget, more creative projects were greenlit where before they'd have been chucked in the trash. This gave rise to some of the greatest directors and writers in film history, just as the collapse of silent films gave rise to the preceding generation of great filmmakers, and so on. And if you look closely, you can see that pattern repeating to this day. Eventually, the budgets bloat, creativity comes last, the audiences tire, and the crash comes. A perfect microcosm of this can be found in one company, Disney. When founded in the 20s, they had two goals in mind: entertain the audience and grow. To accomplish this, they set about hiring the best creative out-of-the-box thinkers, the best artists, and the most astute moneymen. They leaned hard on animation, which was just beginning to be accepted as a viable moneymaker, and built upon the works that came before. Emile Cole, Winsor McCay, and Maybridge's phantasmagoric works all lent inspiration to what would eventually become the Disney Animation Studios, which would eventually create Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the world's first feature-length animated film. Disney Studios built on that success to perfect a formula that gave us some of the best animated films of all time. But then they became a bloated behemoth, more focused on pumping out content than entertaining audiences, which showed in the bottom line as audiences grew apathetic. Hey, sound familiar? They had a huge stock drop in the 60s, a rise and fall in the 70s, and so on. Every time they went bust, they had to go back to the drawing board and regroup, and they kept rising and falling on such a regular basis that I have to wonder that nobody's seen the pattern yet and found a way to prevent it. Which brings me back to my original point. Disney may be an easy target, with their slew of horrific failures over the last few years, but the signs are far more reaching that there's a shift in the wind. DC Warner fired their studio head and brought in a hard-nosed moneyman who cut bait on a dozen projects, even taking a tax credit on already completed works. Cancellations for projects are rampant across the board. Disney is firing people left and right, including Victoria Alonso, which proves that Kevin Feige didn't know what he was doing with the MCU and shoved out other persons who were more creative just so he could hire fall guys for when the going got bad. I mean, come on, Star Trek and Doctor Who even realized the easy money's gone, the fan baiting isn't working, and they dumped the sinking ships on true creatives and nostalgic actors to tempt back jaded fans. Doctor Who with Tennant, Davies, and Tate, then Picard Season 3 with a new showrunner, Terry Matalas, and a host of talented writers that seem salivating to make good on the promise the show once had. And now look at it. We have Willow Season 2 cancelled, She-Hulk cancelled, Ant-Man bleeding money, Black Panther 2 pathetically fading away, desperate reshoots on Indiana Jones 5, Star Trek Discovery cancelled, DC completely rebranding, and on it goes. Meanwhile, a slew of lower-budgeted works that were ignored by the studios are being helmed by real creatives, making bank, and getting recognition from the Academy and fan praise through the roof. Look, I'm not here to get political about the who's and whys about anything. I just wanted to show that there's a pattern that occurs within the industry. And I think that this shift of power from the studio to the fans is a breaking point. Within the next few years, I predict we're going to see fewer bloated budget spectacles and more smaller budget films, with hungry, talented creatives that, though they won't make $1 billion, at least won't risk losing studios a few million per pop. Who knows? Maybe we'll see the revolutionary filmmakers rise from the ashes of a burning industry like we did with Ford, Coppola, Spielberg, and Tarantino. Man, that'd be awesome! A new age in filmmaking is dawning, and if these studios want to survive, then they're going to have to take chances. The time of easy money is over. Let the Renaissance begin. But what are your thoughts? Are we doomed to devour more sludge? Is there greatness on the horizon? Comment below, and if you want more rants, rambles, and reviews, ding that bell, subscribe, and until next time, happy viewing!